Hello. Well, Canada has had an election. What does it all mean, though? Mark Carney is the new Prime Minister, and he soared to victory, getting the most votes that any party has ever got, and getting 43.7% of the vote, the biggest share of the vote in over 40 years. But what does this all mean? We just have to state what is very clear. Donald Trump saved the Liberal Party. Just a few months ago, they were 25 points down in the polls, and the entry of Donald Trump allowed Mark Carney and the Liberal Party to present themselves as a safe pair of hands to captain the ship through troubled waters. That is precisely what this represents. But one thing we should also mention, this was not a landslide by any means. Actually, the Conservative Party got their highest vote since 1988. But how does that make any sense? If Mark Carney got such a crushing vote, how did the Conservatives also get a record vote? Well, it's actually the big story of this election is the complete collapse of the NDP. The so-called socialist left-wing party in Canada got absolutely decimated. They went down from nearly 18% to about 6% in the polls, and I think they lost 17 seats. They went down to just 7 seats, losing official party status. But why is this? We're faced with an abject crisis. There's factory closures being announced, working class people are struggling, and the Labour Party, the party connected to the trade unions, with a socialist heritage, at least in words, can't seem to get anywhere. And this is their worst result in the history of the NDP. Well, who's to blame for this? Who's to blame for this is the NDP bureaucracy. There's a leading group in the party that are, let's be clear, they are liberals in all but name. They could work for the Liberal Party. They'd actually have no problem with that, most of them. They have plotted a course of complete adaptation to the Parliament and in particular to the liberal establishment, and they've abandoned all principle to do so. The pinnacle of this was the Supply and Confidence Agreement that saw the NDP prop up the Liberal Party through the biggest cost of living crisis in a generation. Now they are reaping what they have sown, and they have been decimated at the polls. And actually, where have they lost votes? This is actually important. They didn't just lose votes to Mark Carney, which I do think they lost some votes to the Liberals. They actually lost working class and young people who went to the Conservatives in droves. Poilievre polled number 1 amongst trade union members. That's the first time this has ever happened, that the Conservative Party is polling high amongst trade union members. Also, the Conservative Party, which has, yes, let's remember, Pierre Poilievre has refashioned the Conservative Party into a pro-working class, anti-establishment, right populist outfit. And this message has had an effect. He's talking about boots, not suits. The have-nots versus the have-yachts. Of course, these are ridiculous slogans, but you can see the content of them. It's appealing to working class people against the big financial elites and the establishment. And this has eaten the NDP's lunch. They've taken working class ridings in Windsor and Hamilton, in the 905 around Toronto, in Oshawa. The Conservative Party has swept these areas. They've taken them from the NDP, and the NDP has gotten squeezed out between the Liberals and the Conservative Party. And it is the NDP bureaucracy and leadership who are conservative, extremely conservative, who have moderated the party, who have brought it further and further to the right and made it indistinguishable from the Liberal parties who fundamentally are to blame. Now, Jagmeet Singh, incredibly, seems immune to learning anything, has said that he has no regrets. And he said that last year he could have brought the government down. Now let's remember, he could have brought the government down when the government violated the right to strike of postal workers, of rail workers, when the government funded a genocide in Gaza. He could have brought the government down, but he said he didn't. And it was a principled stand he took to keep the Trudeau government in power, because if he brought them down, then the Conservatives would take power. Well, this is just a Canadian version of lesser evilism. We've seen the failure of this in America, and now we see the failure of this in Canada. No wonder voters fled from the NDP in droves, because the leader himself he said he was prepared to put the country ahead of the NDP. What he meant was put the Liberal Party, sacrifice the NDP for a Liberal government. In the same interview, Jagmeet Singh now complains that Mark Carney is planning $28 billion in cuts to social services, the very man that he helped get elected. Well, this is where lesser evilism leads you. This is a graveyard for the left. This is absolutely no position that any left-wing organization or person should accept. It just leads a further and further shift to the right. And Carney is a step to the right. So now we have Mark Carney and the Liberal Party taking power. This banker, this ex-Goldman Sachs finance capitalist guy who was the governor of the Bank of Canada and the governor of Bank of England is now in power. But make no mistake, this is not going to be a stable government. It's not a majority government, actually. With 169 seats, Mark Carney does not have a majority. He needs at least 3 seats from other parties. But who's going to prop up this government? Well, is it going to be the NDP again? Well, are the NDP parliamentarians going to sign the death sentence of the NDP? I'm not sure they're going to be so eager to burn their hands again propping up a Liberal government and dealing with the consequences of that. Although, I have to say, never underestimate the NDP leadership's ability to adopt the absolute worst position. But we'll see what happens there. It could be the Bloc Québécois. The leader of the Bloc Québécois, Blanchet, has said he's willing to work with the Federalist parties, meaning the Liberals, for the interests of Quebec and Canada. But let's be clear about this. This is a break with long-standing tradition in the nationalist movement, which actually aims to be more of a wrench in the gears of the Canadian Parliament than an active collaborator with the Canadian government. Already, the leader of the Parti Québécois has come out disagreeing with Blanchet. And what would that mean if Blanchet supported the Carney government? Well, all main parties in Quebec, including the Bloc Québécois, are opposed to pipelines. They're in particular opposed to pipelines being built through Quebec, which is one of Mark Carney's election promises. This would be necessary to break the dependence of the Canadian economy on the American economy, sending oil to the American market. Now, this would also be a bad move for Carney, because if he does a deal with Blanchet, that means that he doesn't build the pipeline east. Well, he'll be pissing off the oil barons in the West, in particular in Alberta. Already, the Premier of Alberta, Danielle Smith, has come out saying that she hopes Carney doesn't form an alliance with the Green Party, the NDP, or the Bloc. Well, who else is there to support his government, if not those 3 parties? So basically, this is going to be a very unstable situation in which this government is going to be dealing with a massive economic crisis. Just in the second quarter, the Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses has said the Canadian economy has retracted 5.6%. This is the state of the Canadian economy, and now Carney is having to deal with this problem, and he doesn't have the luxury of a majority government. This is going to be in a very unstable situation, and this is going to be in a situation where we're going to have to fight like hell against every attempt for the government and the capitalists to offload the burden of this crisis onto our backs, onto the backs of the working class. And one very important fact to mention, Pierre Poilievre lost his seat. Now, many people are celebrating this, but let's be clear, the Conservative Party got their best vote since 1988, and this seems to be an outlier in the trend. And Poilievre is not going anywhere. He's going to easily find another place where he can run in a by-election and get a seat, and he'll be in the parliament. And with the inroads that they've made into the youth vote and the working class vote, they'll be well placed to be the beneficiary of any discontent against the Carney government. Now, what way forward? What is the perspective here? And in particular, what way forward for the left? Now, I've seen many people comment online with the absolute abysmal result of the NDP, the collapse of support for the NDP in this election. A lot of people saying, well, it's obviously a failed strategy. Something went wrong. We need to rejuvenate the left, right? We wholeheartedly agree with this. But the question is, on what basis? Now, what are the main lessons from the demise of the NDP and the collapse of their vote? Class collaboration by propping up the Liberals and the abandonment of a fight for socialism. Any rejuvenation of the left must learn these lessons. Now, we appeal to everyone on the left, everyone in the labor movement, that if we want to rejuvenate the left and we want to fight against the attacks that come, we have to fight against any attempt to work with the capitalists and their parties to prop them up, because that only leads to us bearing responsibility for all the attacks that come. We must fight for class independence. And yes, capitalism is in the biggest crisis since the 1930s at least. This system is not for us. This system is not for the benefit of working class people. And we really have to get that through our heads. By accepting capitalism, you end up accepting what capitalism has to offer, which is only declining living standards, which is only cuts, which is only attacks on unions, and attacks on social services that have been won in hard-fought struggles in the past. We must have a clear socialist program. We must fight for the socialist transformation of society. The left must go back to its roots, clear working class, independent class program, and a fight for the socialist transformation of society. That's the lesson learned here, and that's what we need to do to look forward.